Good morning, welcome back to the channel and this week's video. This week we're going to be looking at the history of this old farmhouse on the farm, and indeed a number of the houses, and so that'll be the video for today. Before we get stuck into that, I just wanted to thank you guys for your support, particularly over the last month or so. Those of you who've been liking, subscribing and particularly commenting, so thank you for that. And you know that I love to hear from you, so if you do have something to say or you want to say hello or whatever you want, put it in the comments, because I will get back to you, and for me that's the best part, because I can interact with you. I know you can see me, but I can't see you, but if you're in the comments, at least I can have a chat with you. So that's it. So let's get stuck into today's video, and we'll start looking at the history of these old buildings on the farm. Right, I'm standing outside which would have been the original farmhouse building for our farm here. And this building dates back hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's only when I started looking into this that I discovered a bit more of the history behind this. And if you were to travel anywhere throughout rural Ireland, north or south, you will come across an old building like this, whether it'll be in a good condition, average like this, or an absolute ruin. There is literally thousands of them throughout rural Ireland. And this is the type of house that would have been a farmhouse way back, as I say, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But going back even further than 200-300 years ago, there is archaeological evidence on this farm of settlement and farming in this area going back thousands of years, and I'll get into that a little bit later in the video. These houses, actually we think there's actually two houses here, if not three originally, but this is the original farmhouse, and this over here is what we called the Pruta house or potato house or whatever you want to call it, and that would have been a separate house. But so traditionally most families would have lived in a house kind of like this, and those houses were originally single room houses. So when you walked in the front door, there was literally one room, and that would have been a living room during the day, and that would have been the bedroom at night. Sometimes they would have used the bed to sit on, or table would have folded down. Some of these old houses had even doors that folded in the middle so that the door didn't eat into the space, because space was premium back then. If you had a family of 6, 8, even 10 in a house this size, you can just imagine, you know, how tight and how cramped that would have been. And if you're really well off, you probably would have had a loft, or possibly a little bit of a wall or separating wall, and a little bit of a separate room. So that was for the really well off. For the normal people, 4 walls and a roof, and that was it. So these houses would have originally have been of timber construction, and that was up until the plantation of Ulster and Ireland in the mid 1600s. After the mid 1600s, timber was scarce, and a lot of properties, majority of buildings, were built of random rubble or stone construction like these are. You can see from the old outhouses here how they're built from stone, and that kind of dates this to post plantation of Ulster. So this property, or these row of houses if you like, would have been built in around the late 1600s, early 1700s, and we know that because of the type of construction. Predating that, they would have been of timber. So that gives a little bit of a date on it. So roughly about around 300 plus years old. Now, before we go inside and have a look at it, this property has undergone a number of changes through the years, certainly over the last 300 years, and a number of changes in the last 100 years. And I'd say we'll get into that. We'll talk a bit more about that when you get inside, because I want to show you inside this old building, because it's part of it should be in a museum, to be quite honest. But my ancestors came here in around the late 1800s, because they're not in the 1850-51 census, and they turn up in the late 1800s, and they're indeed the 1901 census. They're recorded as living here. So they turned up here in around the late 1800s. And I think it's my great grandfather purchased this property, and I'll get into a bit more detail of that when we get inside. So let's go in and have a look at inside the property. Right, I'm inside the old farmhouse, and we'll get to the feature behind me in a minute. But I would have said earlier on in the video there, or the introduction to the video, that people have been farming here for thousands of years, and that this house itself has been here for hundreds of years, which it has. And we have found some features on the farm, evidence of that. We have still got some, let me say, I'm not sure if they're Stone Age, but they're ancient tools that have been found on the farm. And in fact, my father found a hammer that would have been used thousands of years ago to shape stones and whatever they would have been doing back then. And I'll show you those. Right, so I said earlier on in the video that there was evidence of agricultural and settlement in this area dating back thousands of years. And I've got here a couple of examples that were found on the farm. This is a Stone Age or Middle Stone Age hammer, a Mesolithic period, which is about 7,000 BC, so about 9,000 years ago. And this is a stone hammer that they would have used to work with, to chip flint and work stone and even probably wood. And you can see the dents for holding it in their hand. And this has been on the farm. Well, this has been on the farm all my father's life and even his mother's life. This has been here. It's not, I don't know when it was first discovered or when it was first brought here, but this is an old Mesolithic period stone hammer. This one here is also of a similar nature, and you can see where it's been buffed or been battered at the bottom where they've been using it. Same as this one's been battered as well at the bottom. And this one here, I remember this being found. My father found this when we were digging out a gate post, and it just looked like another normal pebble. But he dug it out of the dirt and just realized what it was, and it's also a type of stone hammer, which would have been used in Mesolithic periods, say going back some 9,000 years. And I think archaeological evidence in this part of Ireland would suggest that there has been settlement in the Antrim coast going back as far as that, if not maybe slightly further. So that is evidence of settlement in this area. We also had a flint spearhead that was found when my great aunt found it when she was working in the garden. I might have said it earlier in the video, but that has been somehow displaced and we just cannot get our hands on it, which is a pity. There's also a stone axe head which has also been displaced somewhere in the farm, and a few other bits and bobs, but that's the two bits I can get my hands on today. So that just goes to show you. And it's amazing to think that 7,000 BC, that's 9,000 odd years ago, somebody used this to either shape a stone or shape a flint or whatever they were doing with it, both these tools. I think that's absolutely incredible to think that, and that's, say, those were found on the farm here. Okay, so as I said just maybe earlier on in the video there, that my ancestors came here, or my great grandfather came here in the late 1800s. He bought this farm after being in the gold rush in Australia, which was in, I think it started in the 1850s. So he'd been there, got enough gold to come here and buy this farm. As I said, there's no mention of my ancestors here in the 1850 census, but they do turn up in and around the late 1800s and early 1900s here on the farm, and they would have lived in this this old farmhouse. As I maybe said outside, I can't remember because this video is all higgledy-pickledy or upside down because I've been in and out twice with the rain. Yep, the rain's back. Anyway, hopefully it'll go away again. So yeah, they bought the farm late 1800s, and the farm building itself, this old house, is way older than that. So it's random rubble. The walls themselves are about 2-3 foot thick in places, and it's very low ceilings, as you can see. I mean, I'm not quite 6 foot, but I can bump my head off the beam here, just off my head. Very hard to see, very bad daylight in here, which is another feature of the house, tiny windows. So the house itself, as I say, big old random rubble house. So the house itself is random rubble construction, and this is the old fireplace behind me. It's the old, I'll actually turn the camera around, it might be easier. There you go, that's, say, apologise for the light, I can't really show you, but it's, I think I might have to get the torch on it, see if I can get the torch on it, helps. There we go, that's better. So you can see the old fireplace, the old crane, and I remember sitting at that fire many times, having a bowl of soup, which would have been made in a pot similar to that, whether it had been rabbit stew or chicken stew or whatever it was, and my great aunt sitting there telling me ghost stories and all sorts of things. Great memories of sitting here, and that is like a real old fireplace. Right, so that's just showing you the structure of the ceiling. It's very low ceiling, as these old houses were. In fact, back in those days, whenever this was built, people were actually a lot smaller. They weren't as tall as they are now. People are much taller now because they're much better nourished, better food, you could argue, maybe not, but they certainly have access to more food and more nourishment than they were back then. And people have got about, I think it's around 8 to 10 centimeters taller than they would have been 200-300 years ago. So yeah, so that's the structure of the old house. This beam itself, we believe, is the mast of a ship that was shipwrecked off the coast here hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and there's a story behind that, which I'll keep for Halloween. But yeah, so that's that's showing you the structure of the old house. You saw from outside, and probably not as well, you can't see as well in here, but the windows in the house are all very small. They're actually tiny, and apparently that was to do with tax. The amount you got taxed was dependent on the size of the windows. So, I'm gonna fall over something there. So when you had small windows, the tax was less. Also, glass was very expensive back then. So if you had smaller windows, you needed less glass, didn't cost as much. So that explains why they have tiny little windows in these old houses. Right, so looking at the floor, you can see that the floor is of a old concrete construction, and it's actually a mixture of concrete and pebble from the beach, because we're actually quite close to the coast here. So this would have been laid. This would not have been the original floor in the house. Originally, the floors in the house would have been of tamped soil or compacted soil, basically a dirt floor. And in some houses they would have had timber struts laid across, and then boarding, which would have been another typical construction or floor construction before concrete. Now, concrete is not a recent invention. In fact, the Romans used it, but I think in Ireland, the first recorded use of concrete is way back in 1851 in a bridge in Dundalk. So yeah, so this floor has been put in at some point in the history of the building, and would have been, I would say, probably after 1850, maybe early 1900s, that this floor would have went in. If the floor was cleaned, and if the light comes in through that window, if it's a sunny day, you can actually see the footsteps in the floor, which have been worn away as people would have walked in. Now, this door would have been the original front door, and then this old porch was put on in the, I think I mentioned earlier in the video, was put on in the 60s, I believe, to kind of give it a bit more of a shelter. And yeah, so that wouldn't have been part of the original structure from 400 years ago. This is a more modern, well, yeah, 60s to so that's 60, 70 years it's been on here. So right, so we're just upstairs here, and this is just one of the upstairs bedrooms. You can see the old timber beam holding up the roof, and the tiny little windows that I mentioned earlier on. But yeah, so there you go. This is how people lived many years ago. This is the old stairs leading up and down, and it definitely wouldn't conform to any building regulations today, that's for sure. It's probably one of the steepest stairs. It's like the stairs off a ship, actually, rather than maybe it came off the same ship the beam came out of. I don't know, but it's a very, very steep stairs. You watch yourself go down here. Right, back outside looking at the roof. Now, the roof over this here, well, in fact, the roof over all of these buildings would at one time have been made of thatch. At some point in the history of these buildings, they have then have had slate roofs added, and this one also has, this is like an old like asbestos tile roof, I think, which was added to this building again away back in the 60s when this whole property was refurbished. As I said to you earlier in the video, the porch also was added away back in the 60s, and the render was done, sorry, the porch was added way back in the 50s, I think, and then the render would have been done in the late 60s, because the walls were like that originally, this white. You can see the random rubble there on these old houses, but white with a, this is like a whitewash finish. And my father remembers as a kid whitewashing the outside of this house. So the render has been put on even in his day. So yeah, we think around the mid 60s or whatever, the render gone. Kind of a pity, but back in those days, that's what they did. And the thing about this, the render, is that when you put on a cement render onto that type of house, the cement render, if any water gets through that, it gets trapped and it therefore goes in rather than comes out. And there's evidence of damp inside the building. I mean, it's damp everywhere, to be very honest, but and that dampness it kind of stays in the structure, so not ideal. Right, so you've seen kind of through the house and some of the other buildings on the farm. I've talked a bit about the future use. To wrap up the video, what really would you do with this? And I think that whilst it probably does lend itself to some form of God knows what, holiday accommodation or something, there would be a mountain of work to be done here in order to leave this property in a condition that you could use it. I think in the interim, it's just a case of keeping out the weather and seeing where it goes. Do I think this property will be here in another 300 years? If I'm honest, no, I don't. I think the way things are going, you know, traditions and heritage are being just bulldozed over. And that's just part of society. I mean, the planning laws don't help these old buildings. When you apply to replace a building, it's a normal requirement to demolish it, even though it may have considerable architectural and even historical merit. It doesn't really matter, and in certain places this is what's happening. So yeah, I don't know. Future plans for this, for now, it's just holding repairs. Who knows what will happen in the future. I mentioned maybe earlier on in the video about my oiling and greasing my crystal ball. I hope they would have it up and running today. It did blow a gasket, so I can't really use it. So I can't tell you, is it going to be here in 300 years or what it's going to be doing. But anyway, there you go. That's a look around the old farmhouse on the farm. Just to kind of finish off the video, this here behind me is just an old store at the moment, but we understand that this was a shop at one time. So this was the main house and this was a little shop. You can see up there that it does have a chimney, and they did sell produce in there at one time on this farm many moons ago, well before my time, before my dad's time, and even before his mother's time, I'm assuming. These are just, again, some of the older buildings on the farm, and then you get into the more modern stuff. The hay sheds were built the way back in the 50s, I believe, but these are part of the original farmstead, if you want to call it that. That's just a little calf house. That's a stable, and that up there is a little just another little cow house, just a square house. And in there, as we call it, the wee byre, because up there is the big byre. That is where we used to milk cows up until the mid 1980s. There was 8 cows in there and another maybe 3 or 4 in there, and there was 12 cows in the farm. 12 cows, unbelievable. And yeah, that was the big byre, and my father remembers that being built. He was just a small boy, I suppose, and behind that was the field, the wall would have ran along there, and that was taken away, and then they dug out the soil, built that byre, and that's called the new byre. But that went up, I think, in the 50s, my father told me. So there you go. So that's part of this area, but I don't want to go on up there because that's all modern up there, and the hay shed itself is as I said to you, is semi-modern, the 50s, and it's you know, it's not 70 plus years old. Now, plans are, I did mention some future plans, is these houses are going to be hopefully re-roofed. You can see the little lead tingles on the roof. The plan is to re-roof them at some point in the near future. My father has talked about rendering the outside of these houses the same as we did with the old barn down there. Remember I said at the start of the video, it was the same as these. I'm not so sure. I would like to leave them the way they are. I would like to just whitewash them. They probably need a whitewash. Cover them up, they kind of lose their character. But these old buildings do need a bit of work. They need new roofs, new doors, and do need some work. So that is a job for the future. It's on the long finger at the moment because we've been busy up in the top yard and that kind of comes first, but we're going to have to do something with this. Also, the hay shed behind that, I did talk to you before about a little project there where we are looking to extend out the, if we get the angle right, extend out the back of the hay shed coming this way. I can't really show you around the other side, or I would. It's so overgrown that I don't think even the wildlife themselves can get in there. So you can see bits of trees sticking up and things. That is another plan. It would be good to extend that out if we could, but I could maybe go in from the hay shed side. Let me do that. I'll show you what I mean. Yes, there we go. Right, now maybe you will see better. So the plan is to take this section away and expand this old hay shed back a little bit in order to give us a little bit more space for parking rubbish. Anyway, there's that old Peugeot I mentioned previously, whatever it is. If anybody's interested, come and take it with you. Yeah, so that is that. That would be the plan, to take that away, as I say, and take that old tin off and just expand out the back. Yeah, so there's the new buyers, we called it. Currently the tractors are stuck in there, but you can still see the old milk line running along there, and I'm sure the dairy men watching will recognize this. But yeah, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cows we had in there at one time. And there is the old dairy. The old milk glass still there, the cooler, the milk cooler. And the remains of the old tank we just threw into the scrap. The bottom part of it with the wheels on it ended up in the scrap there just the other day. So yeah, so that's the old dairy. Many's a day spent in here milking, cleaning up, and everything else that goes along with it. Yeah, so that is the new buyers, we call them, built in the 50s. This is the dairy beside it here, which I think is a later construction. I don't think they were built at the same time. My father would know that, but I think it was older. But anyway, there you go. There you go, folks. That's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed seeing into the old farmhouse. Again, something different. If you have enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a good old thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you can, please. Greatly appreciate it. As I said at the start of the video, I think I do love to hear from you. For me, it's the best bit for me. So yeah, if you've something to say, put it in the comments and I will get back to you. But that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Take care. See you in the next one. Bye bye.